One of all that is, may these words from our sacred scripture join together with all the words of our world, including the words that I have prepared. And through all these words, may we clearly hear your word, leading us, guiding us into new and more justice-filled directions. Amen. Epiphany, the 12th day of Christmas, is January 6th. That specific day isn't usually celebrated on the actual day by churches such as ours. And anywhere else in the world, this final day of the official Christmas goes for the most part unnoticed, unless perhaps it's used as the marker for that final day that you can keep up your Christmas tree before you absolutely take it down. Right? Don't some of you do that? Or perhaps it's an excuse for a 12th night party. But we don't seem to pay a whole lot of attention to Epiphany other than as a marker between Christmas and whatever comes next. According to Webster's New World Dictionary, the word Epiphany has two different meanings. When it is capitalized, Epiphany refers to the revealing of Jesus Christ to the Gentiles, as celebrated in a Christian feast day of the same name, Epiphany, which is on January 6th. When it is not capitalized, it originally meant the revealing of any deity, but over time it has increasingly become used in a non-religious way to refer to a flash of insight or inspiration, or actually any dramatic moment that instills new spiritual insight, wisdom, vision, or perspective. It is like the aha light bulb. For better understanding of the relevance of the coming of the wise travelers, those ones we call wise men, to the birthplace of Jesus, both of these definitions are important. If we only use the first, that is, the capitalized Epiphany, we take the risk of assuming that revelation happened once in history, and it will not happen again. That all we can do is celebrate that one time that it happened over and over and over again. If we use only the second definition, the uncapitalized Epiphany, we risk assuming that any old light bulb going off can and will reveal equal insights into holiness. So, back to the wise people who followed the star and finally arrived at Jesus' birthplace. Epiphany was the recognition, that enormous, ginormous aha, that the prophecies about the coming Messiah had finally become a reality. The wise people had not merely stumbled on this momentous event. They were scholars who had been studying for years and years the sacred texts, and they had learned their history well. The result of their study was a readiness, or at the very least, a willingness to recognize the sign when it appeared. It is also most likely that these wise scholarly folk did not study only inside their scholarly halls all the time. They were keen observers of the world around them. If they had not been, it's most likely that they would have completely missed looking up at the night sky and see the star rising in the sky. And like true scholars and scientists, they didn't simply assume that they knew everything already. They sought out others to confirm what they had studied and learned and seen. And they were willing to do what it took. The travel, the risk, the asking for directions as they traveled, even if they asked the wrong person. And when these wise ones finally arrived at the place where the star led them, they presented the gifts for a king that they had so carefully prepared, even though they now could see that diapers and blankets would probably be more appropriate. And they were, even now, they were still learners, remaining open to further direction because they received those directions, that information in a dream while they were there, and they went home by a different way, thus thwarting the evil intentions of King Herod. These kings, these wise ones, we've decided over the course of years that there must have been 3, though our scripture never tells us that. And we've decided that they must have traveled on camels, although we really only surmise that because of where they traveled to. But really, all we really know is that there were wise ones, and they came from the east following a star. And yet, those wise ones capture our imagination. What must it have been like to spend one's life studying and observing for so many years, and then to set off on such an amazing quest, such an adventure for people who were scholars? What compelled them? What kind of faith or belief or spirituality or discipline does that take? Popular literature today most often treats spirituality as if it were simply a matter of attitude, of feeling, and emotion. For example, I find my spirituality at the lake, or I find my spirituality at the golf course, or I find mine at up north, or I find my spirituality when I'm listening to or playing music, or perhaps volunteering at the food pantry, or perhaps whatever, you fill in the blank. These may be more reasons or excuses to allow one's spirituality, one's faith, to remain a feeling, a kind of happiness. But it is also true that that kind of spirituality often cannot be sustained, and it disappears relatively quickly when one leaves the place one finds that kind of spirituality. True spirituality requires a discipline. It's not that the places or the activities that I've named can't feed and deepen one's spirituality and in fact provide context for one's spirituality, but without something more, they lack a certain kind of depth. And the something more is the discipline that goes with the spirituality claimed. If I were to say, for example, and this is a true statement, my spirituality is often found in the Boundary Waters canoe area. Well, then, when that place comes under attack by those who would damage forever it with mining, my spirituality would then demand that I learn more, that I read as many arguments as I possibly can to make better informed choices, and then I put my spirituality into action with protesting or signing petitions or doing whatever kind of work is appropriate if that is the course that I choose. The spirituality demonstrated by the wise traveling scholars in Matthew is this kind of broader, deeper, informed spirituality. True spirituality requires more than just having stars in one's eyes. It requires discipline, study, immersing oneself in practices to deepen and embody. It is also true, though, that by so totally immersing oneself in study, burying oneself, could actually take you out of touch. You might actually, if that's what you're doing, you might actually miss the very thing that you are studying. For example, a pastor who spends all her time in her office studying and working and writing and immersing herself in Scripture, but never, ever goes out into the beauty and the damaged places of the natural world, or out into the really hard, difficult places of poverty and need, or into the places where amazing innovations are being accomplished, that pastor might certainly have stars in her eyes, but might completely miss the brightest star of all rising in the sky. And just as those wise travelers did, it's important to do our homework, to take good maps, to utilize the very best technology that we can by having a great GPS, but it's also equally important to stop and ask for directions and gather new information along the way. It has been said that none of us can know everything, and that yet all of us know something. There are always others who are also seeking, who are also studying, who are also gathering information, who are taking risks, and who care about some of the same things that we are searching for good or bad. In the encounter with the wise ones had with Herod, we can acknowledge now that it is good to seek guidance, and that it is also entirely possible that the information we might receive may be flawed, as theirs was with Herod. This possibility, however, should not stop us. Making mistakes is the way we learn. And this spiritual journey ought to be fun. It ought to be exciting and fun. Sometimes we mistakenly assume that study and discipline and difficulty, actually, are the exact opposite of fun. But that is not necessarily true. Study and discipline and regular practices can and do lead to more, not less, opportunities for fun. When I thought of this point, it immediately reminded me of the Prepare Enrich marriage counseling process that I use with marrying couples. It's a wonderful learning tool which provides a lot of information about who each person in a couple is, and then also provides assignments and regular practices for that couple to use and practice to deepen and enhance and, yes, provide more joy and more celebration for their union. And speaking of marriage, that's a good segue to one last suggestion. There's sometimes an assumption that the big event, be it the Epiphany discovery, the wedding, the baptism, the Christmas Day celebration, is when that's over, that there's nothing left. Just clean up the mess, pack away the stuff, and get on with more mundane things. Or perhaps even that we're supposed to keep harkening back to that big event. But it doesn't actually work like that. The study, the learning, the asking for help from others, the taking risks, the evaluating good and bad information, all of that, as part of that process, continues and should continue as we move forward. So rather than remaining focused on the birth, the wise ones dreamed, and they listened to the dream, and they went home by a different way. And we have never heard anything more, ever again, about those scholars, about those wise travelers. The stars were still in their eyes, and they knew there was so much more to come. They knew the baby was only the beginning of a whole life which would be filled with good news. And they went home rejoicing, as we all must. to you so many prayers today. Prayers for Thanksgiving, for getting home when that's what was wanted the most. Prayers for healing, prayers for new hope. And we also lift up prayers for asking for healing, asking for hope, asking for whatever it is that you think is best for us as we move forward in this world. We also lift up prayers for all the places and all the peoples in our world where terror and hate and fear have become the new normal. Help to give us all direction to guide how it is that we respond and offer action and prayers for all of those places in our world and those people in our world. Guide us always in all that we do and all that we are, and put action behind our thoughts and prayers. And let us join together now in praying the prayer that Jesus taught. It's found in your bulletin. Our Creator in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. was written in 1969. Every time I think that is what my life is about. So I hope that you felt a little of that too.